It's amazing to see so many people come out on a Tuesday evening to listen to three boring educators.
Speak for yourself.
I've known you for a long time.
I'm thinking of selling.
I guess there's nothing good on television tonight. I suppose that explains it, right? I may not have better experience than anybody here, but I probably have more experience of education than anybody here. Because I went to school in 1953. That's when I started school. So I started teaching in 1969, and I started working internationally as a so-called expert in 1992. So maybe I don't have better knowledge or better experience than these people, but I probably have a little bit more. First of all, I have to say that don't worry too much about Kosovo education, because you're not alone. Every country in the world is struggling with how to get their education systems up to date. How can their education systems cope with the transformation of the world, with the transformation of technology, with the changes that are happening to the climate, to everything, really. And so it's not something that's unique to Kosovo. You may have heard of a famous compatriot of mine called Ken Robinson, who's quite well known as far as education is concerned. One of my favourite quotes of his is that education doesn't need to be reformed, it needs to be transformed. You know, it needs to be completely changed for the 21st century. Whether that's possible, that's another matter, but we'll see. I said that every country in the world is struggling with the changes in the world and how education needs to keep up. Even the top countries in education, you know that there's a regular PISA study to find out which countries are doing the best in education. The country that seems to come out the top most is Finland. But even there, they are really trying to transform their education. They're moving much more towards a project-based learning form of education. So there's even transformation going on amongst the best countries. I'll talk a little bit about Singapore later on and what they're doing. Schools, it's nothing new actually. Schools have always struggled to keep up with society. I can remember when I was at school being told I wasn't allowed to use a pen like he's using. Because if I used a pen like he is using, a biro, it would spoil my handwriting. I had to use a pen with a nib and ink to write with. I was told that I must have my hair cut, my hair was too long. Things change. But the trouble is, schools don't change quickly enough to keep up with society. So again, it's nothing new. It's because of who actually manages education and who decides the curriculum and who decides what happens in schools. It's not usually teachers. It's very rarely employers. It's never parents. Who is it? Politicians. Politicians usually are the ones who decide what happens in schools. And we have a new government in Kosovo, so I guarantee that all the changes that are planned in education, the new curricula, the Kosovo education strategy, I can guarantee that the new minister will want to change something instead of maybe keeping the change that's already going. We'll see. I hope not. Nelson Mandela once said that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. It sounds very good. On the other hand, it's a weapon, and weapons can be used for good things, and weapons can be used for bad things. So we have to be very careful with how education is used, and we haven't to allow politicians to decide our education system. So, you know, everybody, all people in society must do something to make sure it changes in the right way. I keep looking at the clock, don't worry. I've got another quote for you from Winston Churchill, who was a famous Prime Minister in England. I didn't agree with him politically, but some of the things I agreed with him personally, he said. One of the things he said was that schools have not necessarily got anything to do with education. They are mainly institutions of control, where basic habits are inculcated into the young. There are only 2 times in your life when you will be forced by the government to go and stay somewhere. When you break the law and you're forced to go to prison, or when you're a child and you're forced to go to school. Albert Einstein, who we should listen to because he was quite a clever man, said, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of minds to think." One of the problems with schools is that they push facts upon us. And those facts get more and more out of date. When I look at some of the textbooks in Kosovo, I could cry because they're so out of date and so and just not relevant for today's world. Let's look at another quote. Education is what survived when we forget everything that we learned. In other words, I can't remember much of what I actually learned in school, but I obviously have learned something because it's helped me in my life. So what is it? What are the skills and the competencies that I've learned in my life that has really helped me perhaps be successful in my profession? Because it wasn't all the things I learned in school. Most of those things were useful when I have a quiz competition, but not really in my real life. There is one solution, I think, and it comes from Singapore. Singapore usually does very well in education, but they've had a campaign recently which I think is very wise. They're trying to persuade their teachers to teach less and students learn more. Now that seems a contradiction, doesn't it? If teachers teach less, how can students learn more? Well, there are more ways to learn than listening to a teacher, and I think that's the point. So what should schools in Kosovo teach? Well, first of all, they should teach to innovate. They should teach students to be creative. Again, Ken Robinson said, creativity is as important as literacy. So schools should be encouraging students to innovate. They should learn how to learn. Not just to listen to the teacher, but how to learn. Of course they have to read. They have to learn to read, but not just read the words that are there, but to understand those words. So reading comprehension is very important. They should learn to be able to research, to learn from their own experiences, and to learn from their failures. And not to be told, you've got bad marks, you've made mistakes, that's bad, but you've learned mistakes, so learn from them. Treat failure as something positive. They should be able to use modern technology, obviously, because you have Khan Academy out there. You can learn so much without your teacher, and that's one of the best things that computers can do for us. On the other hand, it doesn't help that when I go into most schools in Kosovo, they don't have internet access, they don't have enough computers, so, you know, what should the government be doing about this? They should learn to question and not just listen to the teacher. They should learn to question what they learn on the internet and not just believe what they hear on the internet. So, there's one last thing that, as a foreigner, I want to say that they should learn. And maybe this has to be taught. Maybe they can't learn it themselves. They should learn to love Kosovo. And that sounds a bit trite, but what I mean by that is, okay, you may have an Albanian entity, origin also, but, you know, don't always fly the Albanian flag. Don't